Brennan with Poets and Quants. Welcome to Center Court, San Francisco. We're here all afternoon. Come down and join us. We're in Soma at a place called Galvanize. It's a shared workspace. Very cool spot. Come down to meet some of the best MBA program directors that there are. We'll have several panel discussions here to give you a little more idea about what the MBA is all about, what admission directors look for, and what you should be looking for in an ideal program for you. And I'm just going to say, come and share a glass of wine with us, because this is one of the few MBA admissions events where we actually bring out alcohol. Now, for all of you people who are going to business school, I just should tell you that you got to be easy on the alcohol, because every moment of interaction with a school is an evaluation moment. But have a drink or two anyway. The people you speak to will be having a few drinks as well. So for the first panel, and this is being live streamed both on Facebook and on our homepage at poetsandquants.com, and we will be producing this video and making it available in our archives for the future. But our first panel is a really cool panel, and I love the concept of this. Everyone wonders what goes on in an admissions committee meeting. What happens behind the closed doors when they have candid discussions about you? And they're talking about your GMAT or GRE score, your GPA, your work experience, whether or not you've been promoted, what your goals are, whether or not you can achieve your goals with an MBA, or are your goals unrealistic and they be taking a chance with you. Essentially, how does that conversation sound? How does it play out? How does it evolve? And we want to open the closed door and give you a glimpse of what that might be like. And I think in a discussion, what it does is help you see what's important to people who make these decisions. And so I think that's really helpful. So our ringleader today is someone who made those decisions at INSEAD for a number of years, and she is now a partner and a consultant with Fortuna Admissions. Caroline Diarte Edwards, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. I would like to invite my co-panelists up to the stage. So we have Betsy Massar, who is with Master Admissions. Take a seat. So Betsy has an MBA from Harvard Business School, and she worked in financial services for several years, both in the US and Asia, I believe, and is a veteran of MBA admissions now, has advised many, many candidates getting into the top schools. And also joined by Natasha Damazi. She's a colleague of mine at Fortuna. Natasha has an MBA from the Wharton School. She was also an admissions fellow at Wharton, so evaluated candidates and interviewed candidates for the Wharton School, and also has a background in financial services, worked at Merrill Lynch, Fitch, and then more recently in fintech startups here in the Bay Area. So as John said, what we wanted to do is have a live discussion to give you an idea of really what goes on behind the closed doors of an admissions committee and how committees will evaluate profiles. And some of our audience members today have kindly submitted their profiles for our scrutiny. So thank you very much for that. We have changed a few details, hopefully to protect your identity, but wanted to give you a glimpse into how the admissions committee will evaluate and assess and analyze a profile and assess fit for a school. So we will dive in with the first profile. Jake, big people, big data. So Jake is a graduate from UC Davis, has a GPA of 3.11, 720 GMAT, and is targeting a number of schools. He is an associate with PwC and has a number of interesting extracurricular activities. He's also looking to continue his career in the HR sector, but making a switch into a tech company. So first of all, Natasha, would you like to dive in with your thoughts on on Jake's profile?
Absolutely. Looks like the light is on. Hi, everybody. Of course. Well, I thought Jake's profile was very interesting, and it jumped out at me because I also have a background in HR, so I understand some of the things that he's accomplished in his career and where he wants to go. Obviously, the very first thing that jumped out at me as a coach is the number of schools that Jake is thinking about, and that's quite a long list, right? And we obviously, as coaches, want our clients to be focused. We want them to know exactly why they're picking certain schools, right? So he might want to think about trimming down that list and, having some safety schools, but also some targets that are, achievable potentially for him. Some other things I would comment on right away, for example, every profile has pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, and that's what we obviously discuss in the admissions setting. Jake's GPA is probably not the most competitive GPA for some of the schools on his list. His GMAT is good, but there will inevitably be people with a higher GMAT, just as there will be people with a lower GMAT as well. So it's a matter of finding the right fit and telling that story. So now that we've established the facts such as the GPA and the GMAT, we start looking at other components of Jake's story. What I really like about his profile is the list of his extracurricular activities. It seems like he's very focused on kind of the people aspect, right? And that does tie with his story of wanting to go into HR, becoming chief people officer at a technology company. So I think all of that is very valuable, right? And that's something that I'd want him to talk about in his essays and his interview. So those are some of the highlights. I will pause here for a second. Let's Betsy have a word.
Is this on?
I think there's a delay.
Is it on?
Yes, I think
Got it. Okay. Yeah. One of the things that's fun about calling this a committee is that not everybody agrees on every single thing. So I definitely agree that the target list of schools is just like he went to Poets and Quants and looked at the top schools and said, which top schools can I apply to? And if indeed he is interested in going into HR, I mean, he has an excellent background in HR. I know the companies, Aon Hewitt, I know from my own career working at BlackRock, or if you know BlackRock, I worked at BlackRock, I worked at Goldman, and some of these companies, we really, they're very good. And his job looks like he's very qualified in HR. So I'm wondering then, with this big list, if he wants to stay in the field, are these schools all the right schools for him? And there could be different reasons for why he has these schools on the list. And for example, one of the stronger schools in organizational behavior or organizational development is Wharton, organizational design. Another school that has a super human capital club is Ross. And so, okay, they're on the list. And then, you look at the other schools. It's like, is he going to be able to really grow at the school that he goes to? So it's someone like MIT once said in a workshop, like, if you want to come to us to do a luxury marketing, I don't think you're coming to the right school. But actually going to Wharton might be the right school because they have the Baker Retailing Center. So you really want to get a sense of this. Having said that, he may also decide that he doesn't want, once he gets to business school, he doesn't want to stay in the field. But let's just assume he does in the interim. And that brings me to the other point, is then why does this person need an MBA? He's got a great background for going to be, going to a tech firm, okay? And, chief HR manager. I don't know what the MBA, he really has to, in his application, make it very clear what the MBA, what the boost is, and what the core curriculum, for example, is going to give him that he doesn't already have. So those are some of the points on that. Where I'm going to politely disagree on the GMAT is it is very unbalanced. I think that a 41 quant, so when an admissions officer, and you know this as well, admissions officers don't need to look at the overall number. The 720 is a good number, that's fine. But they don't even look at that because their brain is so wired to looking at the components. The component of a 41 quant, if you look at the percentiles, and I encourage people not to look at the percentiles, but to keep in the raw scores because they move around depending on when you take the test. But a 41 quant is a red flag to me that this is somebody who may have trouble in the classroom. If that's true, then you go into the GPA and you go into looking at the transcript. So as an objective viewer, I'd say, well, has this person done well in quantitative courses because it's a quantitative program? So these are some of the things I do think about. Recommenders, I looked at the indirect manager. I think that on recommendations, schools really want to see your direct supervisor. It's okay if you can't tell your boss or your company, that's acceptable. It's not a big deal. But why an indirect manager? Former? Okay, but current coach, director? So there's a little bit like there are some opportunities this candidate's leaving on the table. So these are some very specific things that I would like, that I think are doable, completely within his control to think about and to work on.
Yeah, that was a concern that I had, that doesn't look like there's either current supervisor or former supervisor in the recommendations. And that, as you said, it's not always possible to get a current supervisor, although that is ideal if you can. But if you haven't got a current supervisor, then at least you should have a former supervisor there. So I think that would be something that he should look at as well. Great. All right. Lots of food for thought for Jake. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the next profile. So Jen. Jen has a long history in branding and graduated from USC in 2012. So I think perhaps she's been working and studying at the same time. Perhaps she was studying part-time. Got a 3.4, hasn't yet taken the GMAT, and is targeting William & Mary, so the Mason School of Business, and is looking to, so for future career goals, senior leadership roles. So not very specific. That might be something that she needs to work on. What are your thoughts, Betsy, about this profile?
I have a bunch of questions, but I don't want to really go to that. Let me talk about a couple of things. Target school, just one target school, William & Mary. If this person were to come to me and say, Betsy, because I'm an admissions consultant, right? And so if she were to come to me, assuming it's a she, and say, I want to go just to William & Mary, I would say, why do all that work just to apply to one school? And I say this to people who want to go just to Harvard or just to Stanford. If you're going to do all this work and spend political capital with your recommenders, to do this, why just William & Mary? And is it regional? I would say if it's a regional thing, would you look at other schools in the area? Like, I was just visiting Georgetown recently, and Georgetown is a fascinating school, and it's right in the middle of DC. It's just great. Why not look at some of these programs? Also, or UNC. It's just, I'm curious about that. So I have some questions about that. I also have questions. I think that if she were to go into applying with just senior leadership role as opposed to MBA post-career goal, I think you both agree? That's a little vague. Yeah. Now, you don't necessarily have to stick to what you say, but it's really important for someone who's evaluating your profile to get a sense of where you want to go. Like, you have to just put something out there a little bit that makes sense for you, and then you're sort of, what are you working toward? Because that answers the question, why do you want an MBA? So I can't help but look at the Heidi Klum stuff, and that's kind of interesting. That's Hollywood, and it's exciting. This is a person who probably puts up with a lot, can handle a lot of, difficult situations.
Ego.
Yeah. So I would say this person probably has a lot of patience and is probably very organized, and I think that there are a lot of ways you can turn that into stories about leadership. I know. I was telling Ingrid about this. She lived in Europe and she lived in Germany and Monaco, and I was thinking, So one of the admissions directors, some people in the room know her. She is the admissions director of Vanderbilt, Christy St. John, and she used to live in Monaco. So I know that, and now you all know that, and it's like, well, you know, if somebody has lived in Monaco and worked in Monaco, then maybe there's a connection there where somebody at Vanderbilt will read her profile and go, I get it, I understand what she's done. So it's kind of a flyer on that, but why not? It isn't something that everybody has, and I do think on the international experience that when people are trying to build a class, you know, those of you who have worked overseas or have worked with international teams, you know, working with an offshore team or working with people who come from all over the place, that is really an advantage to putting you in the class, because if I'm sitting in the class, I want to know what you are going to provide me as your classmate.
Yeah. Interesting point, Betsy, about the career goals. And as you say, you know, a lot of people will end up doing something different, right? So if you looked at, you know, trying to look at the correlation of what people say in their MBA applications and what they actually end up doing afterwards, you know, it's not a very strong correlation. And admissions committees understand that. So it's kind of odd that they even ask you, you know, what is it that you want to do? Because in most cases, you're going to go through this transformational experience.
MIT doesn't even ask,
yeah,
and they say they don't want to know.
Because of that, for that reason. But, you know, as admissions director, what I saw at INSEAD was that candidates who came in and could really articulate a clear career vision, even if they changed that later on, they had the ability to really, you know, formulate a vision that made sense, and they may reformulate it, but then they would reformulate it and then come out of school with a concrete plan. And on the other end of the scale, you know, candidates who came in with a wishy-washy perspective on what they wanted to do post-MBA, sometimes, you know, maybe they would come into the school and they would still be sort of firing off in all directions. They want to try management consulting, but they're quite attracted by investment banking. And then they, you know, there's some really hot tech companies that are coming to campus as well, and they're just applying all over the place. And the risk is that they are, you know, their career search is too fragmented, and they end up not actually landing a job that they really love at the end of the day and being a bit lost. And those are often the students who sort of flounder at the end of the program and have a crisis because they haven't figured out exactly what it is that they want to do, and they haven't been focused like other candidates. So even though it seems like a bit of an artificial exercise sometimes to sort of, you know, express what it is that you're going to do as soon as you graduate, what you want to do in the medium term, what you're going to do in the long term, because all of that's probably going to change anyway, just having the ability to articulate that and convince admissions committee is really important. Anything else, Natasha, you wanted to do?
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, one thing I would add, and sort of to paraphrase some of the things that Caroline already said, there are lots of questions within the MBA application package that are essentially targeted at testing your self-awareness. And this question about what it is that you want to do afterwards really is a self-awareness question, right? There are things that are plausible given your background and what you will learn in the context of the MBA program, and then there are things that are probably not going to happen in spite of, you know, you being very persistent. So it's very important to weave that story correctly. I remember when I was applying to Wharton, I was interviewing with an alum, and I had a story like everybody else. And I finished my story, and he gave this long look to me, and he said, "That's a good story." And I said, "Thank you." And I got in, right? But obviously the fact that it was a good story and he enjoyed listening to it, it was unusual, that stuck with him, and I was admitted ultimately. So stories matter. That's what people remember, right? Everybody will have a GMAT score, and some people have the same GMAT score as you, so your story definitely matters. What I would add specifically about Jen's profile, I completely agree with Betsy that she should expand her target school list. I actually think that profile could be very interesting. She has what we probably call a non-traditional profile, right? But that is your chance to be memorable. To Betsy's point, somebody might have lived in Monaco, but those who haven't probably really want to, so they will remember you as well. So it's those little moments that you have to bring to life for the admissions committee.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next profile, please. So Aditya. Aditya has undergrad in econ from Duke, 3.7 GPA, stunning 760 GMAT. And he's an associate consultant at PwC, lots of PwC today, and also seems to have a sideline as a Bollywood reality TV star. It's interesting, as you were saying, have a story. That sounds like a good story. So, Natasha, what are your thoughts on this profile?
Well, I think first thing that we all noticed is that Aditya is also with PwC, and that's actually a great illustration of what the files in front of the outcome actually look like, right? Inevitably, there will be people from your firm, especially if you're in a major investment bank or major consulting firm, and then what is it that sets you apart from your colleague? And, I'm sure that Aditya and Jake are actually doing very different things because PwC is gigantic, but it's important to communicate that to the admissions committee. Like Caroline said, obviously there's something memorable that we all zoomed in on right away, the reality TV gig. It looks like there are also a number of extracurriculars focused on diversity that Aditya is involved with, and that's, I think, very valuable, very interesting, and something to definitely play up. I like the fact that he has international exposure. These days, lots of MBA programs are moving more and more towards having a large percentage of their class come from international territories. And having that experience obviously is very valuable. It shows to the admissions committee that you will be able to work on a team with people who are from a different culture, different country. Maybe it's their first time living in the United States, right? Kind of going back to Jake's profile, he didn't have international exposure per se, but he made an effort, it sounds like, to work with international teams. So my advice is, we're not all born abroad. Not everybody has like a Monaco citizenship or something like that. But you can always make an effort to work with international teams, maybe take on an assignment abroad. All of those things will be very valuable. And you can also have international aspirations afterwards, right? And the MBA program kind of prepares you for that with the network that you build and other exposure of that sort. Commenting on some other factors in this profile, I think his GMAT is, fairly competitive. It's a lot more balanced with a high quant score. The GPA from Duke in economics, very quantitative discipline, also, I think, speaks well for his quantitative abilities. So I think he's good on that front. And like Betsy was saying, a lot of schools, will really zoom in on that quant score. That is definitely true for Wharton. I think anybody applying to Wharton has to be aware of that. A lot of other schools will be, more willing to perhaps not focus as much, but definitely a must for Wharton to demonstrate quantitative ability.
Thank you, Betsy.
I got a question first on our time. So I'm going to say only one thing so we can go on and make sure we get all of the other ones. The only one thing is yes, we all noticed the thing about the Bravo reality TV show. Just my advice on that is this is someone with a very strong background and has a lot of things going on, and I just don't want this person who may or may not be in the room to sort of say, and I'm honoring our talent. I think it should be, in some ways, I would recommend that they minimize it and not try to lead with it, because I don't want people to think that I don't want an admissions committee to think that this person is really just all about themselves. And
it's probably something that's going to jump out anyway.
It
so
is,
perhaps
absolutely.
not necessarily to put it up front and center.
Yeah. I mean, it's a subtle thing. I mean, it's just, my thought immediately was like, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But I know we've got some time things, so I'm just moving.
Thank you. We'll go to the next profile.
Actually, if I may, I will add one point on that. I completely agree with you. Something big like that can kind of overshadow everything else. But I have worked with clients who were very shy. And that was very obvious to me from the very beginning. We started working together. And, if all goes well, you end up in an interview in front of the admissions officer. And you have to be able to speak comfortably. So I think something like that, depending on, the extent and reason for involvement in a Bravo show, it might have been that Aditya decided at some point to become more social and work on some kind of weakness, right? And this is helping him. Sure. So that would be my thought on this. It's just a matter of execution, really.
All right. So moving on to Dolores. So she is Harvard undergrad, Fulbright scholar, 3.72 GPA, 750 GMAT, McKinsey analyst. Does she really have a chance at Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton, Betsy?
You know, what's not to like is really the first thing I was like, well, what's not to like? And there's a couple of things, though, that she can actually do to make this even stronger or to work on this. And so one of the things is when she puts together her application, as a McKinsey business analyst, she's going to be competing with other McKinsey business analysts, okay? Also, Kingfish is, I looked up Kingfish before I came here. Kingfish is a relatively small PE firm, so what are you really doing there? And so making it really clear that she's going to be just on the work front, okay? On the work front, she's going to be competing with her peers. How does she stand out from her peers? Part of that is going to be through the recommendations, and I'm going to say right up front that Cambridge professor thing is not necessarily a good thing, because why wouldn't she use, yes, she's doing a principal at her current job, and that's great, that's Kingfish, but why wouldn't she use somebody from McKinsey? These people have been writing recommendations since the day recommendations were invented. Why would you go back to a Cambridge professor? There are no schools that really want an academic. There's only one school that I know of that even thinks about it, and that's the Harvard Kennedy School. All of the other schools are like, we want somebody who sees how you work in an organization. So those are some of the questions I would ask about this person. So I would say that the Cambridge professor is, what my husband says, snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory. I think there's an opportunity for this person to really stand out. International experience, I will say, I love you, Caroline, but the UK is not the same as working, for example, overseas in Latvia. It's not as much of an international
How did you know I'm from Latvia?
Did I? Oh my God. That's so awesome. That's a good story.
It was a good story.
But I like her, and I have one other thing, practicing my one-liners on this, is when they say a top 5 presidential campaign. So we know that this person's a Democrat, okay? We're assuming it's a Democrat. And it's like, okay, so I'm trying to think of it can't be Biden because he's pretty much number 1, and it's probably not Sanders or Warren because they're 2 and 3. So it must be Mayor Pete or Kamala. And I was just thinking, like, does Harvard ever call itself a top 5 school? Right? So that's how we know it's not the top 1 or 2, right? And so it must be in the other. So I'd be really curious, whoever you are, Dolores, out there, if I've got it right on that. So I'm interested in anybody. I come, and this is where people's biases come in. You coming from Eastern Europe. Can I call Latvia Eastern Europe? Or
You can. Latvia would probably disagree with you. I'm actually Russian, so you totally can.
Okay. All right. So, we all come with our own prejudices. Before I went to business school, I worked on Capitol Hill, and, I have a Washington background, and I worked long and hard for the Hillary Clinton campaign. Having said that, I have supported and seen fabulous candidates who are on the other side of the aisle, and I would say to that is, if I had to have a debate with them, I wish it were them and not some of the other people that I'm seeing in politics today. So it's not like... And one of them, a very conservative Republican, came to me and she said, I'm really worried that admissions is going to look at me and say I'm too conservative and not admit me. Well, she got it to Harvard and Stanford, and it was because her faith as well as her politics were really important to her. So it really doesn't. So I'm covering a bunch of different things here, but I just like the fact that when the schools are talking about getting involved with their community, the community can be the whole wide world, and politics is a really great way to practice articulating an argument.
Absolutely. Okay. Should we cover the last profile or wrap it up now? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, ladies, for the fascinating insights. Great discussion about some very varied profiles. Lots of good advice. So we will be here for the rest of the day. If you have questions about your profiles, please do let us know. We'd be happy to discuss it. Thank you, everybody.